This is the 20th anniversary of the invasion of Iraq, and Stefan Simonowitz, if I pronounced that correctly, did a great, one might say epic thread on everything that has been proven about the invasion of Iraq since we were told all those lies 20 years ago. And I want to show some of this. I don't think I have time to go through all of it, but I think a lot of people don't realize just how much has been revealed about the invasion of Iraq. We all know WMD weren't found, but it's far larger than just that. He says, on March 19th, it'll be 20 years since the start of the Iraq War. 50 days before the war, OTD, in 2003, Bush said the 16 words. The British government has learned that Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa. It was a lie based on a forgery.
The British government has learned that Saddam Hussein recently sought significant quantities of uranium from Africa. Our intelligence sources tell us that he has attempted to purchase high-strength aluminum tubes suitable for nuclear weapons production. Saddam Hussein has not credibly explained these activities. He clearly has much to hide. The dictator of Iraq is not disarming. To the contrary, he is deceiving.
And of course, this is the thing where the United States accuses others of doing what they're doing. I mean, Bush is blatantly lying. All of them are blatantly lying, and they accuse others of lying. So, to cover their own tracks, but also in this case, to justify an invasion. And we also know from General Wesley Clark revealing, even though he is a standard Democrat, and he actually was the supreme NATO allied commander at one point. So this is no leftist. This is no commie pinko. He has revealed that when the day after 9/11, he went into the Pentagon and certain people told him that they were going to invade 7 countries in 5 years. One of them, or the first one, would be Iraq. And this is the day after 9/11. So they literally had no idea who had done it. And they had, they had no idea who had done it, except they had months earlier had documents that said bin Laden determined to attack within the U.S. And they were saying, okay, now that that's happened, we're immediately invading Iraq. And Wesley Clark, despite being a general, despite being a military guy, and despite being all for America, he said, wait a second, what's Iraq got to do with this? Well, nothing, but they wanted to invade Iraq. Simonowitz continues, the documents claiming Iraq was attempting to procure uranium from Niger date from 2001 and were obvious forgeries. They'd already been investigated and debunked. The CIA and State Department had raised doubts about their legitimacy at least 14 times. The International Atomic Energy Agency judged them to be forged. On this date in 2003, a day after his State of the Union speech, Bush met Blair and told him he intended to invade Iraq, even if UN inspectors found no evidence of WMD and it considered flying U-2 reconnaissance planes over Iraq painted in UN colors to tempt Iraqi forces to fire on them. So this is a Blair Bush deal before the Iraq War, basically to invade Iraq, whether anything was found or not. The Bush-Blair memo is a secret memo in their 2-hour meeting in Washington exactly 20 years ago. It shows that Bush and Blair made a secret deal to invade Iraq, regardless of whether WMD were discovered. But Bush and Blair had been plotting the invasion of Iraq for at least a year before the Iraq War. In the 3/28/02, this guy's British, and for some odd reason, he puts the days first on the date. I don't know what you're doing. The 3/28 memo from Colin Powell to Bush, he writes that Blair will be with us should military operations be necessary. The UK will follow our lead, which, by the way, the UK has always bent over bent over in every which way for the United States. So that's no big surprise. A memo from Blair to Bush on October 11th, 2001 reveals they were openly discussing toppling Saddam Hussein just a month after 9/11. We need to deal with Saddam, Blair writes. I am sure we can devise a strategy for Saddam deliverable at a later date. This is long before they had any connection to Iraq has weapons of mass destruction and they're gonna get us. And like this was before they'd even done all that propaganda shit. And still, the UK, and US are saying this. And I've discussed this before. I think the other hidden side of this that people don't seem to realize is why did Iraq have to be destroyed and turned into a failed state? Well, the real reason was not the oil, because the U.S. has a lot of oil, and there's ways for the U.S. to steal oil without destroying an entire country. And at the end of the day, the U.S. didn't even steal that much oil from Iraq. Very little, actually. So what's the real reason? Well, the real reason is that Iraq dropped the petrodollar, and Iraq was going outside of the U.S. central banking system and was threatening the OPEC system, or threatening the petrodollar OPEC system that said that all oil is, sold and bought in dollars. And therefore, the US dollar is the global reserve currency, which also gives it power. So if you start chipping away at that, if countries start going outside of the petrodollar for oil, then all of a sudden it starts to break down, right? Other countries may say, yeah, this is a good idea. We don't like the United States either. We're going to sell and buy oil and other things. And of course, that's what's happening right now. It took years and years to happen. But now Russia, after having the sanctions, which the U.S. put on them, is now saying, we're going to sell sell our oil in rubles. So you've got to give us rubles, which has given a lot of strength to the ruble. The U.S. sanctions have kind of backfired in that way. And that's the real reason that Iraq had to be turned into a failed state. Same with Libya. Gaddafi was going outside of the central banking system. He was discussing switching to a gold dinar as the currency for all of Africa. And we see what happened to Gaddafi and Libya. So you see this again and again, that's the real reason. The U.S. has a lot of reasons to hate countries. I mean, we don't hate Cuba. Our ongoing economic war against Cuba isn't about the petrodollar. It's about other things. But the countries that we really fuck up, that we fucking rain bombs down on, it's usually connected to central banking and petrodollar. Those are the ones we really fuck the fuck up. Whereas the other ones, it's like Cuba, we're content with just kind of fucking making their lives miserable and having economic war against them. Because what we really hate about Cuba is just the threat of the good example. They give everybody health care, they give everybody employment, they give everybody free education and free housing. And, they have a socialist country. That doesn't mean all of it's perfect. I think that's a straw man that people use. They'll find something bad about Cuba and go, well, what about this? And it's like saying that all these things are positive in Cuba does not mean that everything is perfect in Cuba. Anyway, here is a continued quote from Blair to Bush. God, this sounds like some fucking. It sounds like some Hugh Grant rom-com line, like where they're like at the end, "You had me at hello" or whatever. I realize that one's not Hugh Grant, but literally, Blair said to Bush, "quote I will be with you, whatever." Like whatever may come. Does that not sound like a bad romantic song? I'll be with you, whatever may come. I'm with you, good sir. The quote then continues, getting rid of Saddam is the right thing to do. In removing him, do you need a coalition? The U.S. could do it alone with UK support. So here's a quote from Rumsfeld. Iraq poses a serious and mounting threat to our country. Yeah, right. In 2002, he said, we know they have WMDs. Well, they used to have WMDs because we sold them to them. We gave them WMDs, but they no longer, in 2002, they no longer had WMDs. And he said, quote, we know they have WMDs. We know they have active programs. There isn't any debate about it. Yeah, there's plenty of debate about it because you're fucking lying. The U.S. and British were lying us into war. And so here's the famous Colin Powell speech. Actually, I'll go ahead and play part of it out loud.
The gravity of this moment is matched by the gravity of the threat that Iraq's weapons of mass destruction pose to the world. Let me now turn to those deadly weapons programs and describe why they are real and present dangers to the region and to the world. This is evidence, not conjecture. This is true. This is all well documented. Less than a teaspoon of dry anthrax, a little bit about this amount. This is just about the amount of a teaspoon. Less than a teaspoonful of dry anthrax in an envelope shut down the United States Senate in the fall of 2001.
Which had nothing to do with Iraq. We know that now, and they knew it then too. Nothing to do with Iraq.
This forced several hundred people to undergo emergency medical treatment and killed 2 postal workers just from an amount just about this quantity.
By the way, there's a documentary, I can't remember what it's called, on Netflix, which here's the aspect of that thing that he just mentioned that I didn't know until a few months ago. So as you'll recall, white powder was delivered to multiple places, among them Congress, but it went through the postal system in DC. So they evacuated Congress immediately, right? Got everyone in Congress out, the whole building. The postal area where the letters are, sorted and everything. They went in there and asked certain questions of people, looked for white powder and things like this, but kept it running, kept the postal facility running. And 1 or 2 of those postal employees, I believe, died. So this is how the U.S. government works. We know there's a deadly powder that has been sent to lawmakers. We evacuate Congress because they're worth protecting. We don't evacuate the postal facility because they're not worth protecting. And sure enough, multiple people die. And there's never been any accounting for it. There's never been any reasoning behind it. There's barely been any coverage of it. Like I said, I don't know if you knew it. I didn't know it until a few months ago that they had kept that facility open while they had evacuated Congress. But that's fine, right? Because those people don't matter. Postal employees don't matter. Idiots, sold off millionaires in Congress, that's who matter. Those are the people that really matter. We got to protect them. Those are important people. Whereas postal employees, who gives a fuck if a couple died? Not a big thing. It's disgusting.
That was inside of an envelope. Iraq declared 8,500 liters of anthrax, but UNSCOM estimates that Saddam Hussein could have produced 25,000 liters if concentrated into this dry.
Do you hear all the equivocation in everything he's saying? Saddam Hussein could have done this, but he didn't. If concentrated, but it wasn't because it didn't exist. Not only that, he's holding up a tube of that's not anthrax, so fake anthrax, like baking powder or something, that is not from Saddam Hussein. He's never, even as he's holding it up, he didn't claim that it was from Iraq because it wasn't, because it's not even real anthrax. On top of that, they showed that fucking mobile lab unit display at this same speech that he gave, which was called the home run speech, right? This was the Colin Powell did it, and now we can invade Iraq. The images they showed of the mobile labs, if you'll recall, you can Google it right now, they're not images, right? They're drawings. They're like a computerized mock-up of a mobile lab. Why is that? Because the mobile labs didn't fucking exist. So the U.S. government and Colin Powell and his stooges had to create cartoons of the mobile labs that don't exist. They might as well have written Acme on the side of it. It's not a fucking real thing. And so he's held up, it's like him holding up a crayon drawing and saying, here are the mobile labs that Saddam Hussein has. On top of that, they showed footage at this same speech. They showed footage of a jet spraying some sort of aerosol out of it, and they claimed that the jet was, dropping chemical weapons, but they didn't reveal, which is, investigators have looked into it, and it's been proven that they didn't reveal that video was from like the early to mid 90s. It had no connection to reality in the 2000s, but they played the video as if it was currently happening, as if Saddam Hussein was spraying chemical weapons. Anyway, this is the bullshit that they put forward. Many of you knew at least some of that. And by the way, Colin Powell apparently resisted. I don't know whether this is true or whether this is just the myth Colin Powell wanted to put forward afterwards. By the way, Colin Powell was a fucking awful human being and a dick throughout his entire career. Like, in Vietnam, he helped cover up American atrocities. Like, go read about Colin Powell. So it's not like he was some good guy who he put forward the myth. I know he's dead now, but he put forward the myth that he fought against all of this, and maybe he did fight against some of it, I don't know, but that he didn't really want to give that speech, and he said, quote, "I'm not reading this is bullshit," and he changed a bunch of lines. But even so, even if that is true, he still did it. He still fucking did it. He committed war crimes and gave a big fucking speech to justify war crimes. After reading the draft of Powell's speech, a senior CIA agent expressed doubts about the validity of the information based on Curveball. Curveball was the code name of an Iraqi defector who had falsely claimed that Iraq had biological weapons. The entire claim that Iraq had biological weapons program was based on a single unreliable source. Curveball was never interviewed by U.S., UK security services. UK and German intelligence expressed doubts about his claims. Oh, there it is. There's the cartoon. They just showed it. The cartoon of the, there it is, of the mobile weapons lab that does not exist. Why is that a drawing? I mean, like a computer mock-up rather than a photo? Because it's not a real thing. His ex-boss had told German intelligence he was lying. 20 years ago, Blair's spin doctor, Alistair Campbell, issued the dodgy dossier on Iraq's WMDs to journalists. Much of the dossier had been plagiarized from unattributed sources. Well, anyway, I could do this all day, so I should probably wrap this up. But in September, Campbell had published another sexed-up dossier claiming Iraq was able to deploy chemical weapons. Boy, utterly false dossiers that have tried to justify wars. Where have I heard that before? Well, yes, that's right. Was there a dossier connected to the DNC? The dossier in which they claimed that Donald Trump was, he was compromised by Russian prostitutes that were peeing on him or whatever the fuck. All bullshit. All bullshit. And the America does this again and again and again. And it's amazing that your average American believes any of this shit. I mean, after WMD in Iraq, after this utter horror show, which the number is not repeated enough, so I'm going to keep repeating it till I fucking die. 6 million. I mean, it's going to go higher, obviously, but for now, 6 million people have been killed in the wars on terror, the various wars, Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, Libya. 6 million. 6 million. Just keep repeating it to yourself. 6 million people. And it's not talked about enough. It's not covered. And yet people still believe the garbage coming out of our mainstream media.